Hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome back to another edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Today's topic is, so you want to coach in the NCAA. There's only one guest that we could bring in, one person that we've had on the show so many times. He easily holds the record for longest term guest on Our Kids Play Hockey. That man is Pete Whitney. I'm going to welcome him on the show today, but I'm also going to welcome back our good friend Christy Casciano-Burns,
Hi,
who was
guys.
abroad. She was abroad, and now she's back. She came home. She came home to us, back on the air. Christy, first off, great to have you back.
Yes, thank you. Apologize for the dog barking in the background. It's raining very heavily here, and he gets upset by that. So I'll mute myself at times. So
Well,
I'm going to mute right now. You start us up.
I will. I think everyone knows this is a pet-friendly show. We know many of you listen with your dogs and cats under your arms because they're interested too. But let me throw it over to Pete. Pete, first off, great to have you back. This is a topic that actually you approached us with, which I love, which is just about, we're going to dive into the NCAA coaching sphere, how to become an assistant coach. We're also going to ask a lot of questions from the parent and kid point of view. So it's really important, again, if you're listening to this and you're not trying to be an NCAA coach, that you know what coaches go through, what aspiring coaches have to think about in order to get themselves to the next level, which can arm you with some really interesting thought processes when you're playing the game. So, Pete, happy to have you back.
Thank you. It's great to be back, and I'm enjoying your mug as ever.
Well, listen, if you're on the show 3 times, you get a free mug. I believe this is your 4th appearance on the show. So we'll have to figure out some other gifts to get you when you get to 6.
All right.
All right. But
Sounds
Pete,
fair.
let's start with you here, man. This is a topic that was something you wanted to talk about. There's a lot of different directions we could go with, but why don't we start with just the mentality needed if you want to coach at a higher level, right? Again, a lot of coaches at the youth level, volunteer coaches, but I have had many coaches, this should be no surprise to the audience, come up to me and say, hey, how do I get to a higher level? How do I get to a point where I'm paid for this or professional at this? What do you think is the first part of the mentality of doing this to know, okay, this is something I want to pursue?
Well, I think you're talking about a passion, right? So let's take that youth coach. You're around the game and you love it, and let's say you're coaching peewees for your town organization. The thought is, so now how do I advance? What can I do? And honestly, the short answer is early on, really be ready to work for nothing for a while.
Very true.
Because that's one of the things, Lee, is typically now the assistant coach is a former college player, graduate, wants to step in to a salary, in some cases a high salary if you're talking Division I, but with playing experience, but not really any experience around team culture, about the X's and O's of, and this is the X's and O's of, do I know where I'm going to go? Am I going to know the school? Like,
Right.
I got to know the nature of the school. I got to know their strengths. I got to know what courses they offer. I got to know what tuition is. I got to know what you need as a GPA to get in there as a student. I have to know all those little things that are the details that, again, throughout coaching, details are what matters. And so those are the things that have to happen. And then above that, you also have to realize too, which a lot of guys and gals, I think, don't when they first step in, is you actually have to take a test through the NCAA so you know all the rules and regulations so that you can get through compliance. So there's that piece of it too. So that's the least fun parts of it, maybe, but the important parts of it, knowing that kind of thing. So knowing that, having that passion, connections, because sometimes it's right, former players calling their old coaches, seeing if they could jump on a staff, that kind of thing.
Is it best to start as an assistant coach when you're starting off? Like, let's say there are opportunities, especially women's hockey. There are all these opportunities popping up because women's hockey is growing. More colleges are putting together teams and they're looking for coaches. Is it best to start off when you're starting off as a higher level coach, to start off as an assistant and learn under someone? Or do you think take that bold move and go ahead. If there's a coaching job open, go for it. What's the best suggestion? What's the best path?
Well, I think it depends upon the individual, right? Because there's all different types of personalities. Not everyone is a type A personality. So you have to look at that piece there. I mean, for me, you have to have had some kind of experience coaching at some level prior to that. I think if you want to be your best, just because it's like, so I want to bake a birthday cake for my wife, and I've never baked a cake in my life. But you know what? I'm just gonna go read a recipe somewhere and throw it all together, and then try to figure out why it didn't work. Well, it didn't work because nowhere did I realize that you have to let the cake cool before you frost it. You can't take it out of the pan too early. All those kinds of things. So I think having actual life experience in anything you do is a benefit.
Christy, this man has
Okay.
made a cake before. I can tell by the way he's describing the cake.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
So is it better to bake the cake as a sous chef, so to speak? Learn under somebody who you really expect and admire, or should you go ahead and take that bold move? And if you've got what you think is pretty much enough experience in the lower levels to go for it, or is that a bad move?
no, I would never tell anyone not to try. I mean, so now you start to talk a little bit about a topic that I enjoy throwing in is confidence versus ego,
Mm.
Yeah, it's a great.
right?
I love this.
Right? I mean, confidence, Chrissy, is it's a feeling of self-assurance, right? That comes from you having appreciation that you know your own abilities and your qualities. Whereas ego is a sense of self-esteem or self-importance. And that's the biggest stumbling block that I have seen in head coaches and in individuals trying to become assistant coaches, understanding and being comfortable with knowing it's okay to know you don't know everything.
I love that, and I love that you're bringing it up for multiple reasons. One, this transcends just coaching. Obviously, you could apply this to being a player too.
Absolutely.
But one of the things is this: I think when you're a young coach, and it's weird because my coaching journey was really backwards. I started as a head coach in my early 20s. There was a lot of ego in that time. I have no problem telling everybody that. I mean, I felt like I was a king. It didn't mean I did my players wrong or I did anything wrong in that front, but I needed to work on myself a bit more. Now, I always say I was really happy with my experience as a head coach, but I also know, and I knew this coming out of it, man, I got a lot to learn. And I almost immediately dropped the ego and started becoming an assistant kind of for the purposes of this program. And I searched out great head coaches that could teach me something. And I've said this on the show many times, and I know Pete, you and I talk about this a lot. And I think this speaks to what you just said. Good coaches know everything. Great coaches know they know nothing. It
Right.
is an evolving science every year. And trust me, when you think you got it, something's going to change, especially
Right.
when you're dealing with college students. And look, here's the truth about college coaching too. You get older every year. The students stay pretty much the same age. All right. And again, when I started, students were usually 18 to 22. Now it's more 20 to 24. All right. But you're dealing with a younger generation. And I'm going to say it again, every year they stay the same age and you're getting older. So the way you did it 10 years ago might not work today. Aspects of it may work. Right. But this is where I think we talk about the ego, and that to be a great coach, you really have to be a student and you have to yearn for the knowledge of the game. And again, this is true for players too. It's just a little bit of a different process, I think, when you're coaching and managing personalities, and other things too. I wrote down here, Pete, I wanted to bring this up too, that I think one of the big misnomers that sometimes young coaches have when they jump into an NCAA system is, well, I'm just going to do the hockey. Man, that's part of it, but that is not the big picture. I mean, your
Yeah.
job is to graduate these kids, right? Maybe I shouldn't call them kids, right? But that's, really should be one of the prerequisites, is that your goal is to get them through college or to the next level effectively, right? The hockey's part of it, but that's not the whole plan. You have got to understand recruiting. You have to understand, like you said, Pete, the aura of that school. What does it mean to coach at that school? Which you did successfully at Post University, from really the birth of that program through many of the successes. So Why don't we turn that way a little bit too, Pete? And feel free to comment on anything that we talked about here. But
Right. And I
hockey's just the
also like,
start.
Lee, that you brought in the fact that you're dealing with a lot of personalities because
Oh man.
as you know, Pete, especially with the college age kids, you're dealing with all kinds of angst and, especially the first year students, they're trying to figure everything out, trying to figure out how to be a part of that team.
Right.
There's a lot of nervousness. So there's also that aspect beyond just teaching these kids how to be great hockey players. You're also dealing with a lot of different personalities.
Right. I mean, the reality is, as a head coach, as an assistant coach, I think in any NCAA sport, you have to understand that you're in the service industry.
Right.
Right.
That's a great
That's-
point.
Yeah.
That's what you're there for. I mean, you are there for like to see that they have the best possible experience they can have. Because again, while they rotate through, depending on your career, you're the constant as a coach.
Right.
So they only have that snippet. They've only got that get rid of the COVID year thing. They've only got 4 years. They've only got 4 years to have this experience. So your job is to give them the best opportunity within those 4 years to have that best experience. So the question is, how do you develop everything from, you've got your off ice culture that you need to talk about. What are we going to be? Are we going to be strong academically and we're going to be really big into community service? We need to define what that is for them. Our on ice culture, what are the systems and beliefs we're going to play? What's our playing style? Are we a puck possession team? Do we back check all the time? All the details that have to occur, shift in and shift out. And then I think finally the locker room culture, the etiquette, cleanliness of a room, respecting each other's space, trying to make everyone belong. So again, these are all the things that are not X's and O's, but I guarantee you, if you don't have these particular things in order, your X's and O's are not going to matter. Because I have seen so many teams with talented players, and then I watch games and I try to figure out what the heck is going on. And then when you dig a little deeper and you're able to kind of talk behind the scenes, there's always something going on behind the scenes that's not X's and O's related.
Right. You're so right. And I think it's so important for head coaches in particular to be great communicators. And sadly, I've seen coaches who aren't. They just assume after your word has spoken that everyone digests it and gets it. And that's not always the case. And when there's a lack of communication and effective leadership, the team falls apart. It can be pretty chaotic.
Right. I mean, honestly, the redundance of the airline industry, I think, is a piece that every coach should take. I don't ever want to assume that because I said something that you understand exactly what I said. I want to get it back from you when we want to hold meetings. We need those open lines of communication because at the end of the day, as you said, especially as a freshman coming into a program, you're looking over your shoulder everywhere. You're trying to fit in academically, socially, athletically. You're trying to fit in every single corner, and you need someone who can do that and not just look at you and go back to the 1970s and say, figure it out, because that's not the world we live in anymore. And
Not
it's,
at
to
all.
me, I enjoy that because it makes you, for me anyway, it's made me a better coach. That personal, that interaction. And I think the success that we were able to have in a fairly short amount of time was because we invested in the individual as much as the athlete.
You know, one of the things I love that we're talking about too, from a communication standpoint, our producer, Caitlin, who has a teaching degree, wised me up to this. You know, I used to say there's 3 or 4 different ways to learn and retain information. And she actually told me there's actually 7. Right. And I can't list them all, but the point is when I realized that, it's like, oh, wow, I have a lot to learn about communication. But the bring back point here is this: as a coach, especially an assistant coach, this is a role sometimes you have to play. In the big picture, people learn one of 3 major ways, right? They can read it and retain it, they can see it or retain it, they can hear it or retain it. And then another one would be like you have to do it to retain it. Man, as a coach, you gotta know how your players retain information. It's not their fault if they can't read it and just figure it out. That's not for everybody. So I think part of the role of a coach, or specifically an assistant coach, is that the head coach has to obviously communicate what they want to happen broadly. But I've always found one of my roles as an assistant coach, which I really relish assistant coaching now, where I'm at in my life, for lots of reasons we'll go into later, is the ability to say, okay, I need to talk to these 4 players because I know they need a little more support in terms of how they're going to get this. Or even telling a player like a freshman, listen, you're a visual learner, right? You got to do it to learn it. Don't be first in line and try and impress everybody. Go fourth or fifth, right? See the drill a couple times and then execute, right? Little tiny intricacies like that. That's part of the people process, we can call it, I guess, of being a coach. Go ahead, Pete. Comment on that, because then I have some notes here I want to dive into as well.
Yeah, no, I I agree with that 100%. And what you're talking about is I have to know that individual.
Absolutely.
Because again, sadly, into today's world, there is a lot going on in these kids' lives. I mean, there's everything from the nuclear family to, in some cases, no parents.
Right.
So those things happening away, I got to know what is in your head on a daily basis.
Right.
Right. So those are the conversations that you have to have. Again, that goes back to, like I say, you're in the service industry and
Right.
you're really a personnel manager, I think, first and foremost, because until you can get everyone on board, understanding and knowing that you actually care what is going on in their lives, they're not going to be able to perform for you, or and definitely not for each other, because they're still going to be caught up with those other things. So the meetings of like what's going on, like I knew who, you know, kid had he was an uncle. It was his brother had a little baby, and the kid was so excited about that. But he was really like chirpy in the line and all that, and it seemed as if he wasn't really paying attention. So pull him aside, have a quick conversation. Hey, what's going on? I'm just all jacked up because you know, I had I'm an uncle. I'm an uncle for the first time. This is amazing. And then what I did, brought the guys together and just sort of announced it to the group.
Right.
They gave him a little stick tap and everybody was excited and we all kind of moved on. So we shared in his joy, but now now he was all part, everyone was part of it. It wasn't like, well, what are they talking about there? What's he saying? What's going on? So
I love
knowing
it.
knowing your players, knowing their life situations, it's hard. Like, I'm sorry, but it's difficult. Like if you, especially as an assistant, if you jump on board with a team and you think, oh, it's summer, it's great, I can take my foot off the gas. I mean, that's your golden opportunity to get to know your guys,
Right. And
right?
they
I
want to
mean,
hear from you too.
Yeah.
yes, and yeah, I mean, I did that on a weekly basis. I would make our phone calls, we'd have Zoom meetings. I want to get caught up on what's going on. So that when we
Right.
get back to campus, we could continue certain situations maybe that needed to be talked about. And it can be that whole thing with again, we had on the back of our all of our apparel, warm-up apparel, something said one family. And to me, that resonates with every player if you're actually, walking the walk.
Right.
Right. And I think too, coaches need to understand, especially at the high level, if you're just getting into it, every year can look different. I'm thinking about my daughter's college years, and the first year, great senior class, such wonderful glue for that team. They leave, and that important dynamic is gone. Now you're starting over again. You got a new crop of kids coming in. Some of the personalities don't mesh, different philosophies. So how do coaches keep that consistency, especially when it fluctuates so much? I mean, you could have one year where you're golden, you're champions, and then the next year you look totally different.
Well, when I was coaching, my goal was not to create a team. My goal was to create a program.
Okay.
And the difference between the two is exactly what you're talking about. In a program, you have a certain culture that you set. To me, culture is honestly the lowest denomination of behavior that's acceptable to the group. So the higher your standards and the better your culture is, it's easier to continue that going through. And that may be community service, that again, that may be all those little things that we do in an effort to bring us together away from the rink, which will make a difference inside that locker room. So creating an actual program. Again, plenty of teams, well, this team, I look at a roster, this team is loaded with players, but they really don't win much, or they don't win when they need to. So why? So it always goes back to that culture, to that feeling of belonging that we all crave as human beings. We all want to belong and we all want to feel valued. So how do you do that? And that's the trick in athletics, right? Because that 20 goal scorer has a different value than the fourth line, we'll call it penalty killer. However, both are equally important. So you have to understand that as a coach and be able to communicate that to those players, that everyone has a role, just like that player that's in and out of the lineup, who is, their role is to constantly push someone else in an effort to get into the lineup, which makes everyone better. So
And yeah,
all those pieces.
and I think a lot of coaches fail in that regard. They do. A lot of times they'll treat their top line players as the stars, and that fourth line doesn't always feel as important. Like, oh, I'm on the fourth line, that means I'm not good enough. And I think coaches fail to make each kid, each player feel like they're a valuable part of that team.
Yeah,
And that's the difference between successful coaching and coaches who just collect the paycheck.
yeah, listen, I agree. And the reality is it's hard, but at that time, I think when I was coaching between Division 1, 2, and 3, I think there were 165 NCAA men's programs in the country. So for the 7 years that I coached, I took pride in the fact that I had a job that only 164 other people in the entire country have. So I'm going to give this thing 100%, right? I owe the job doesn't owe me.
Right.
That's a great statement right there.
That is great. Write
wanna-
that down.
I've got it. I was just like that. I make notes anytime I go, yes, that's my
That needs to be in the locker room. Put that one up.
Pete, one of the things I love about our friendship, and we text a lot, is the clear passion, not just for the game. I mean, you obviously have passion for the game if you're coaching at a high level, right? But it's the passion for the people, what we're talking about. Like, you and I have such a deep care for our players. And I think that makes all the difference. And I think that a lot of young coaches, it's not actually, this isn't limited to young coaches. Now I'm thinking about it. They're chasing glory. All right. And look, glory is great. Winning a championship is awesome. I would never, ever downplay it. But if that's your goal, you're actually shortchanging yourself pretty heavily. Right. That is not the primary goal. It's never been the primary goal when I coach, because people are going to think I'm insane for saying that. I have a higher goal, which is what Pete is talking about. The culture as a standard, the people, knowing that I care about them, that they know I care about them, and that's also returned, and that there is a devotion to making them a better version of themselves. That thought process will breed results. Championships are a result of that. And you come to learn pretty quickly, I think, in the coaching journey, when you pursue that kind of infinite goal, that while championships are great, not the only thing. It's not the reason you're here, right? If that's the only reason you're here, you're going to bounce around a lot. You might not last too long. All right. You've got to have a higher calling, an infinite game. And I'm telling you right now, everyone listening, and this, you could bring this all the way down to the mite level. I mean, I really mean that. There is a power and enjoyment. There's not enough words I could pick here, that when a group of people believe in each other and they can look at each other in any moment and just know, I got your back and I know you have mine. Not only is that something we need more of today, but it is a miraculous moment. And I have been on the championship bench when, Pete, you just gave the example. We have to ride our top level players and we have to sit, unfortunately, the bottom players, but there's an understanding from those players that this is my role at the moment. I need to make sure that the team succeeds. right? The cultivation of that is a gift, first off. But to me, like, that's the why behind you're doing this, right? So I'm going to kind of spin this back into a question. If you want to get into coaching at a higher level, you don't need to fully have a grip on this immediately, but this is something you're going to have to want to develop. In addition to your knowledge of the game, there has to be a why beyond just, well, I want to win an NCAA championship. All right. And again, you can go all the way to the Stanley Cup. You can watch Paul Maurice winning last year and the way he talks about his gratitude to everyone and everything that led to that moment. It wasn't just the moment that he was focused on. So again, bringing that back to a question, the why, that's where I'm leading towards, Pete, is you have to have a why, a really strong why, I think, if you want to dive into coaching. And I think maybe we should talk about, how do you identify what that why is?
Yeah, and I think part of the issue is today with the younger players coming out of college and wanting to be coaches and that success you're talking about, is they're kind of a victim of the current society, right? Because we have things called Instagram, we have
TikTok.
Snapchat, everything is
Yeah.
instant gratification. Now, for me, honestly, one of the things that has really helped me over the years was the fact that one of my background, and I've talked about a little bit, was in horticulture.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain plants that you plant, and it might take them 4 to 6 years for that crop to come in. So you learn patience, and you have to care for it and nurture it, and some fall off along the way. So there's always found a lot of parallels between the two. But having the ability to have a set goal is the key. So you're a player and you say, you know what? I'm going to score 20 goals this year. And you're the new assistant coach. Coach, we're winning the whole thing this year. Okay. So my question to both of those individuals is, so if you don't score 20 goals, are you a failure?
Right.
If you don't win the championship, are you a failure? Your success, wherever it may be, will be a byproduct of all the other details that you take care of. Because in today's instant world, not that you would be necessarily great at it, meaning me, but I could probably go online and figure out how to coach lacrosse or soccer or any other sport, just like anyone could figure out how to coach hockey. But that X's and O's piece is the smallest part of what it is.
It's so true.
So I just feel like knowing yourself, like when I got into this, I was so excited about that. It was a goal of mine to become an NCAA coach. That was a goal of mine. Once I became that NCAA coach, my goal was for me to try to be the best NCAA coach I could be.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I pursued. And any other success that I was fortunate to have along the way was simply a byproduct of me focusing on that, not on the prize, so to speak. And I think that's important as you're learning and growing, especially as a younger assistant coach. As you know, like as you get to the higher levels, as you get to the pro levels, it's a different animal.
Totally.
That's one of the beautiful things, honestly, about coaching at like the Division II, the Division III level, because some of your players, will have the opportunity to go play some minor pro probably afterwards. But the reality is, this is it. You can create something for these individuals and stay connected. I mean, I'm still connected to players that played for me 7 years ago. We're on group chats and we do all that kind of stuff because we actually do care about each other.
It's funny you bring that up. And for some reason you just remind me of this. I had a player get inducted into the Hall of Fame for the school that I coached at. And he mentioned my name in his acceptance speech, and he called me afterwards. And this was 12, 13 years ago.
Wow.
The connection is there. And look, while I appreciate he mentioned me, the connection is what I was most impressed about. It was that, wow, he still feels that bond that we had when he was a player, and he's a father now. Like he's well out of college, right? I mean, he's in his mid-30s. It's that is something that transcends any championship, any win. And I'll tell you this too, Pete, is at the pro level, and I've been very blessed to coach at a semi-pro level. You know, it's real easy to say or have people say, well, look, you know, the wins and losses now they really matter. You're getting paid to win.
Yeah.
It's true, but it doesn't change my approach. Like, you still care about the people. You still got to put the
Yeah.
time in, right? I think the
Yeah.
difference at the pro level is, you know, you can move players in and out very easily, right?
Right.
I mean, you can form a roster that you want, and guys will be there for 10 years. But it doesn't change the culture piece. It doesn't change the personnel piece, and you can learn that really well in the collegiate situation because of the rotation of the players. One thing I want to dive into now, we're talking about the joys of coaching. But there's other things you got to be prepared for. If you're the higher level you coach, the harder some things have, right? Some things come across. Like, for example, cutting a player is not easy, and it never gets easier, right? Whether it's NCAA or pro, you're at some point going to have to sit down with a young man or woman and say you are off the team. All right. It is really hard to do. All right. That's one thing. The time commitment. I can tell you this right now. And I'll be very I'll be very black and white about this. When I had children, I realized rather quickly that I'm either going to be a great coach or a great dad, but I don't think I can do both at the same time at the speed that I'm going. Now, it doesn't mean I left coaching. What it means is that I had to rethink how I approach coaching to make sure that I'm still a good father. All right. Because I will tell you now, and there are many coaches that have had to make this decision, and it's not easy. You are away a lot. You are completely dedicated to your team. Your weekends, if you're in college, are gone. All right. I mean, you can quickly be in a position where your kids, and I have had a lot of coaches tell me this, your kids will look at you and say, why do you care about that team more than you care about me or us? All right. And that's, look, this is a decision every coach needs to make individually. I was very fortunate that I created a life for myself where I could come and go with teams and touch and do the team building piece that I do, but largely be there for my children. That was my choice. All right. Also, the lifestyle that my wife and I have allowed for that, right? That's not everyone's case, but that is a decision when you have children that will quickly come up. Other things too is the time commitment. I just talked about this. I can tell you, Pete, the moment that coaching became my life, this is actually kind of out of a movie. I was sitting at a desk in a suit, working in a kind of almost a sales job. And an opportunity came up, and I realized I'm going to have to volunteer to do this for free. All right. This coaching job. And I remember the moment I said, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to leave my job and do this for free. And again, economically, I was in a position to do that somewhat safely. I mean, that was important. But that moment is when I decided this is probably going to be my life because I'm willing to do that. And it became it, right? But these are like the risk cliff jumping moments, cutting kids, the time commitment, becoming a parent, having a relationship, right? Outside of the team, obviously. These are not easy things that coaches deal with. And I think that if you're going to think about becoming an NCAA assistant or head coach, these are things you have to talk about with your family or with your own mind. Am I correct on that?
No, 100% you are. I mean, my first paying job in prep school, I remember, they came to me and it was, the admissions director. And because you wear more than one hat, certainly when you're in prep school. So it was admissions and it was also, coaching hockey.
Right, right.
So he said to me, I can pay you. So first off, I'm pretty excited about that because he's saying he could pay me. And he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull our advertising spots from PBS this year. And I'm going to give you that money.
Wow.
So that made me feel good. But then I thought, I don't really hear us on PBS too much. So how does that
How
translate?
much we talking here?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, how
That
much we
doesn't sound
talking?
like a lot of money.
Right, it was not a lot of money, but again, in my case, I was fortunate because I had my nursery, I had my farm, I had another income source, so I was able to pursue that. But it was hard. It was difficult. I mean, I have a son that played in the NCAA, and when I was coaching prep school, I would say in the 4 years that he played, I probably made 12 games.
Mm.
Because guess who else plays on the weekend besides college, right?
Right. Prep schools,
And,
yeah.
and it was conversations that we had, and we talked about it, and we supported each other, and we still do. You know, he's still in hockey, and I'm still dancing around it a bit here. So that was huge. That was huge for us. But yes, it has to be a commitment. The worst thing you can do, the biggest disservice you can do, not only to yourself, but to your players and to your staff, if you are fortunate to become a head coach, is not be all in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Right.
hard.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
hard, right? Because again, like
Yeah.
I said, there's only 100 and probably maybe it might be closer to 175, 180 teams now, but it's kind of hard to give up that goal, that thing that you strive for, knowing that, someone else potentially is better equipped
Right.
from that sense to do this than me.
Right. And especially if you're a mom or a dad and you've got kids who are in sports, your spouses, your kids need to be all in too, if you're going to make that kind of commitment. And I think you got to lay it out to them, saying, hey, I'm not going to be here for your games, or, telling your husband or wife that
Yeah.
big dinner party, I'm not going to be there. It's on a weekend. So you really have to carefully weigh the pluses and the minuses. What's it going to do with your family relationship? Even though that's your dream, because that's a huge part of it. Like you said, it's not just you that has to be all in and telling them the team, the college, the organization, but your family has to be all in too. That's really something important to weigh.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And Lee, kind of going all the way back to what you're talking about, that youth coach that wants to advance, that's where the sticking point generally is, because those are individuals that have careers, they
Right.
have well-paying jobs, and it's hard to put that aside, especially if you have children. If you have children, it's
Ooh,
a
it's
whole
hard.
different thing. If it's just if
Yeah.
it's you and your spouse, right? Then between
Well,
the two of you, you can probably figure it out. But man, once you
Right.
get kids,
Pete, I'll
Yeah.
tell you
Yeah.
this. We've had conversations about this where I've said to you that, the game is calling to me. And it's hard. Because here's the thing. My primary role in my life is a father and a husband. Like as much as I love hockey, nothing trumps that. But there will be time. Look, I'll give you a great example. Everyone listening that plays will understand this. We're recording this in the late summer. In 2 to 3 weeks, there will be a morning where it is slightly colder than it is normally, and this chilled breeze will come over you, and you'll know hockey season is about to start. Okay, it's one of the cool.
That's right.
You just know it's an amazing feeling, and it's tough if you know you can't dive in. You'll experience this. The tough part, you'll experience this when you're done playing. Those first few years out are hard, but if you're coaching and then not coaching, it can be hard. So I've always said that the game calls to me, but you have to have your priorities in order. Now, I also want to say this, Christy, to your point. My obviously my parents have always supported me. I mean, that's one aspect of this, but my wife has been incredibly supportive of me. And when I look at my coaching journey, which has spanned over 20 years now, my wife, who is a physician, God bless her, but she was going through med school when I was starting this journey, and then she was in the Air Force during this journey. We had to have a really clear understanding, a commitment to each other's goals, and I supported her, and she supported me, really without question most of the time. And what I mean by that is there was never an inauthentic challenge to what I was doing. We've had conversations about, is this worth it? And we've had good conversations about, is this the direction you want to go? But there was never you can't do this anymore because I have my own goals. We completely supported each other. It's one of the things I'm most proud about in my marriage, aside from our children. It was the ability that we've had to communicate and work together. I'm also very blessed because I don't think that that's actually the common ground for most people. I think this is very hard. All right. I think, when you're pursuing coaching and you're a type A personality, you tend to think you're the main character in the story. And the truth is that that's not how life actually works, right? There's 8 billion main characters on this planet. You just happen to be one of them, right? So I think we're bringing up a good point here that if you're going to dive into coaching, I mean, NCAA specifically for this episode, these are conversations you need to have with your loved ones, with your spouses. If you have children, you should talk to them about it. Mom or dad's going to be away a lot if I do this. Are you okay with that? Can you support me with that? And then you have to make a decision. And again, look, there's a lot of positives in coaching. Like I said, I would never tell anybody not to coach if they want to coach, but you got to think about these things because Pete, you said it a minute ago, the drive can waver at times. And I'll tell you right now, if you walk into a locker room and you're not feeling it as a head coach or an assistant coach, and that feeling continues for a while, you really need to sit down and meditate for a minute on what's going on. All right. Yeah, look, like everybody gets burnt out from time to time. Don't get me wrong. All right. But if you can't be all in, it might not be the right fit right now. And again, look, I know a lot of coaches and professionals in general who have stepped aside just saying, I just wasn't feeling it the way I used to feel it. It was time. Right. I also know some people I think that will go to the grave being all in. Right. But I mean, it's just a larger point of the discussion here is that you got to make sure you have your priorities in order. You've got to make sure that you know what you're stepping into and that you're willing to take that step with the people around you and you're not pushing them aside.
And that actually speaks a little bit to the whole thing we were talking about earlier. I brought about confidence versus ego.
Right.
If you're really confident in what you're able to do and you're confident with that person, because similar to you, like I'm incredibly lucky with having a wife that was so supportive. I mean, I remember when we went to we had that great run. We went to the championship game, lost by a goal, went through the room, talked to the boys, came out after. She's out there in tears. I'm the one that actually had to hug her and tell her that it was all right.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Right.
She's
right there
just
with
as
you.
invested in it as
Yes, just as invested. So,
yes.
but knowing that you have someone like that is really, really important. Like it's a hard decision for you to make. I can't move forward because of X or Y. But if you can't move forward, quite honestly, it only affects you. If you decide to move forward, even though you shouldn't, it affects up to at least 30 people.
Right. That's a good point too. And look, you have to think about those other people. And I know what it's like. And I think a lot of the listeners will too, to want something so bad, but you gotta look at the full picture here. Cause if you don't have the full puzzle in place, it's not going to be what you think it is. Now, with that said, when you have a supportive system surrounding you, man, that helps the success of these situations, right? And again, we're talking about spouses, we're talking about parents. That support system goes well beyond just those people, right? Friends play into this, your team plays into this, right? And I don't want to go too deep into that, but the experience of sharing extreme happiness and extreme pain with a group is important, right? Like as humans, we need that. We could tap into that. Pete, another direction I want to go with this, and this is a funny one. When I dove into coaching, again, I was in my early 20s. I wanted to do everything. I was diving into this. I was diving into that. Almost completely burnt myself out by the second year. You realize pretty quickly you can't do it all. You need great support systems. You need great assistant coaches, people that you trust emphatically. But what I started to realize, Pete, and this is something I want you to talk about 5 or 6 years in, I started to realize that while I was proficient with all aspects of coaching and running a team, and what I mean by proficient is I could do it, I started to realize this culture piece is really my realm. Getting the group to believe in each other, building that team culture, building the trust, building the communication, and then starting to realize, wow, if I support a head coach in this realm, I'm far more effective as a coach. You want to talk about dropping ego? I realized I think I'm more of an assistant coach than a head coach after a while, right? Doesn't mean I couldn't be a head coach, but I found my niche, right? Building team cultures, building team bonds is what I love to do. I study it. I'm passionate about it. I'm always learning. I mean, I'm very blessed. A lot of people call me an expert on this now. I'm still so far from where I want to be in terms of learning about this. It's an eternal pursuit. When I figured that out, I really had this direction in coaching that I didn't have before. And I'm able to go into a head coach's interview and say, look, this is what I do. Almost in a take it or leave it kind of attitude. I don't mean that in a cocky way. It's like, no, this is what I do. If you don't need this, I'm not a good fit for your program. Right. Again, this is 20 years down the line. I'm very blessed to be in a position where I can kind of pick and choose things like that. That's not what it's like at the start. Okay.
And
But
I and
how
I
important
also
is that?
want to ask too,
Yeah.
when you're looking for an assistant coach, since Lee, you were into that, do you want somebody who's like-minded, or do you want somebody who's different than you? You know, the good
Mm,
cop, bad cop thing, right? So maybe you're a softie and you want someone who's tougher, who can be more of an enforcer, or do you want somebody who's very much like-minded? What do you look for in an assistant coach?
Well, for me to be successful, the like-minded piece comes in the philosophy. And the philosophy is not just the X's and O's piece. The philosophy is what I talked about earlier. The culture, how important this culture is important to me. Is it important to you? Tell me why it's important to you. Ask the same questions. Honestly, the questions when interviewing for an assistant coach for me were pretty similar to the questions I was asking a player. I'm not gonna ask a player, hey, can you shoot the puck? Can you see the ice? Because those are all things that you figured out when you were scouting that player. So what makes you a fit for the team are those other aspects. Are we gonna be on the same page with our philosophies of the importance of again, as an assistant coach, helping get those kids through education wise with
right.
study halls and things like that. Understanding what limitations we may have, because with us at the Division II level, which is kind of peculiar, interesting. Division II men's ice hockey is the only level of Division II that does not offer athletic scholarship money,
Right.
only academic. So you have to know, but you have to know that stuff. So getting them on board so that we are like-minded. The easiest way to find out if you're like-minded with somebody is go take somebody out to dinner and see what they order. And if you look at it and you say, I have no idea what that even is that you're eating, it might sound like a silly thing, but it does two things. It opens maybe my eyes a little bit that there's another world out there. And we can have a little discussion about, so how come you like that? And
Yeah.
we can spin that into a discussion about anything else. So,
Right.
so you like that. So when you're in a situation where we're together and maybe you like a player or you like their actions and I don't, how do we deal with that? And we can
Yeah,
have that
so
discussion.
if they're ordering filet and lobster, you may want to question whether or not they're on the same page with you, right?
Right,
I also
exactly. No, exactly.
I keep an eye on how they treat the servers and the waiters.
Exactly.
I always keep an eye on that too.
Yeah. So
The
how do they treat the
I
Right, how are
always
they
look at that.
treating the
that's a
waiters,
great
the
Yeah,
question.
waitresses?
I look for that, right? Like, how do you treat the people around you? I was at dinner one time, not kidding, a professional dinner, and someone I was with waved away the waiter, like like with their hand. And I have never done work with that person again because of that moment. It was unbelievable. Pete, the word that comes to my mind is shared consciousness. Is can you create a shared consciousness with these other people? And look, Christy, it's funny the question you asked because my favorite story to tell about this is when I was working in the UK, the head coach of a team was from Russia, and I explained to him pretty to the point. This is my team building philosophy. This is why I think you need it. And I'll never forget him looking me in the eye because this was a stone faced man. Like he does not show a lot of emotion. And I'll spare the accent, but he basically just said, I don't know how to do what you do, but I know that I need it. And he hired me on the spot. And he went on, and he's one of the greatest tacticians I have ever worked with. He taught me so much about the X's and O's. And in turn, and he has told me this, I taught him so much about culture building that, we don't work together now, but he still implements this and he still credits that with a lot of his success, which means the world to me. But that's an amazing uh, 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 example of this, right? Where we both learn from each other. We had a shared consciousness. Adversely, I worked with another coach, was an AHL coach, tremendous human being. We bonded over trust more than anything. And we were very yin yang. All right. I was very much I don't want to say the joker on the bench, but I was running the defense on this team in addition to the culture piece. And my D needed to be a little loose, and he understood that. And I had that balance, whereas he does not coach that way. All right. He is a very stern, this is how I want it done coach. But we learn from each other, right? So I like the aspect of that too, Pete, is that, look, when it comes to assistant to head coach, there has to be an understanding of that. we'll just call it hierarchy for the episode, right? That the head coach makes the final call, and as an assistant, you assist that person with the role that they play. You can disagree, never do it in front of the players, right? But at the end of the day, that's that person's call, and they have the right to make that call, and that's okay, right? I think that's we'll dive into that in a quick second too. But that shared consciousness of coming into the room and saying, yeah, I can work with this person. I have turned work away. I've turned work away if I don't think that the person in charge has a shared consciousness with what I bring to the table. It's not going to work, right? So I think we're bringing up a good point here, is that it's always going to come back to the people, right? You got to understand the people that you're working with.
Yeah, 100%. I had an assistant who at one point told me that it was something really super simple. But it ended up being a good example. We're on the road and like the room is like dead beforehand. And I said to him, I said, where's the music? Like, and he said, well, I don't know. I said, the guy's got to bring music. He said, well, they should know that.
Oh,
And I said, once you assume they should know everything,
right.
we're destined for failure.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I would much rather you go in there and mention it, and then maybe it's like, oh yeah, it's in my bag, coach, or all
Right.
right, we'll bring that next time. But you can't assume that they should know, because that ends up being a little bit of a cop out, because now you're avoiding, and confrontation is not always necessarily a negative thing. You hear the word, it's not necessarily a negative thing, but that a great opportunity for him to teach them, say, hey, I played, boys, and this is really early on. This is like literally the first year of the program.
Right.
This is what you got to do.
A small example, but a small example of a bigger problem that will, escalate down the road, So yeah, it's a great example.
Yeah.
Just curious now, because college sports is changing so much now. The growth of hockey is fantastic. There are more teams. So now more opportunities for, for new coaches. Do you think it's time for some of the older coaches to kind of let the reins go a little bit? Let some of these, I think some coaches hang on a little too long and don't know when to leave. I've seen that. I have an example that just happened. I think the coach just stayed a little bit too long. So how do you know when it's time to step aside?
I mean, I think it depends upon the individual. Again, you look at everything from your success to it to, honestly, is someone from administration telling you something, having a polite conversation with you that you've been here for 25 years, we don't win, we have to make a change, that kind of thing. But for me, I think where the value would be, like for myself, like I don't think that I would be a great candidate for anyone to slide in now and be a head coach. But I think I would be a really good candidate for them at some program to create
Oh, sorry.
what would be a, if you want to term it, coaching advisor, coaching mentor, team,
Okay.
senior hockey advisor for a team. Because now I'm looking at everything from 30,000 feet, right? When you're in it as a head coach, that can be difficult to do. But if you have the individual with the experience, the life experience, as well as the athletic experience, I think you could be very, very valuable to helping mentor the younger coaches and just interject, when appropriate.
That's great. Also, I think a lot of assistant coaches assume because they've been with a program, and let's say the head coach steps aside, that they're automatically going to be tapped to take over the reins. And I've seen that locally with one of our basketball programs. Everybody thought this one coach, assistant coach, was going to get it because of politics or whatever, doesn't. Then that assistant coach leaves. So for those who want to be the assistant coach, don't assume, right, that you're automatically going to be the next head coach, right? That's another aspect to think about.
No, that's another thing. And, you know, you hope at some point when you have that discussion, and that there was a discussion, that there is some exit, exit strategy, unless you're in a situation where you're getting fired, which there isn't any exit strategy there really, other than administration firing you. That you have that discussion. Hey, listen, I have a plan where X year or X season, I'm going to be leaving this. So you need to start doing some things to put yourself in the best possible position if you think that you want to step into that head role. Because there are some players too that, or coaches, I should say, that maybe don't want to do that. Maybe they're just loving it. I mean, honestly, one of the reasons that I left prep school when I was coaching was I had been with this group for head coach for 12 years, the assistant coach for 11 years. And it was absolutely fantastic. I use the expression that you shared a brain. We shared a brain for a lot of reasons, but between the three of us, at least we had one brain. But we shared that brain. We shared that brain, and our success was really good. I mean, we had 70 plus players that went Division I, same amount or more, Division II and III, NHL draft picks, Coach a Hobie Baker finalist. But I knew when that head coach was moving on, I would never have that same 12 years, that same feeling going to that every single day. So rather than trying to replicate that as, potentially becoming the next head coach, I wanted to keep that memory and create a new memory, which is a big reason why I moved on to the NCAA.
That's so important for for future coaches to keep in mind. There's a lot that goes into it. When you decide to stay with a program or leave a program. And that was a great example right there of how you came to your decision.
Yeah,
There's a lot to it. How much do politics play a role in who gets to be head coach? Is that still a thing?
Listen, you know that there are no politics in hockey.
That's why we have the show,
really?
right? No, I'll say this too,
that's the
Christy.
reality of it. People have to realize that that's part of the game. You got to get ready for that.
It is absolutely part of the game. And I think that's when we find good people. You want to stay with those people as long as you possibly can, as long as it's working. And, Christy, you're bringing up a great point. And this is especially for the parents listening. The coaching staff's a team within the team. And like any team, they have good days, they have bad days, and they have to find ways to work together too, while also simultaneously trying to get 20 players to do the same thing. So there's a lot of moving parts. One thing I wanted to talk about on this episode specifically, Pete, with assistant coaching. And again, this kind of all comes back to what you started with the ego. And I alluded to it a few minutes ago, is the understanding that you make suggestions, but the head coach, unless he is delegated to you, makes the decision, right? And you have to have a really clear understanding of that and drop the ego. And I'm telling you right now, if you're an assistant coach, whether it's happened already or hasn't, the day will come where you really disagree with the direction a head coach might be going with a situation, a team, a play, and you have to be okay with the thought of, I disagree, but this is not my call. And you have to drop the ego. Now, listen, a great head coach will always give you the ability to voice your opinion in a professional way, right? I've always told when I was a head coach or as an assistant coach, I will not disagree with them in a public view of the team. That is not correct. It is not professional. It hurts the team bond. The best coaches I've worked with have always given me the time to sit down and say, hey, I don't agree, right? I can think of a situation right now where I sat down with him 3 times, and on the 3rd time, he said, okay, I think you're right. But he disagreed with me twice. And my point to you is this: that's okay, right? As an assistant coach, your job is to assist the head coach, in addition to obviously supporting the team and the players. Your job is to take their vision or create that shared vision and execute it with the understanding of they are the one driving the ship. So, Pete, again, I'm saying this a little strictly, but I would love for you to talk to the audience about that a little bit, because I have also had assistant coaches that aspired to be the head coach. And to your point, Christy, politics can someone play into that? And, you know, they
Sure.
may or may not make a decision to better their chances at that if you're not careful.
Right.
That is like we talked about, that's the ugly side of it, right? But I try and avoid that at all costs. I don't ever want an assistant coach to think that they have to do that to better their position. But Pete, go ahead, dive in on that. And that's my last question, because I think that's an important aspect of it.
Right. I agree. I mean, for me, it was always, we can talk about anything. We might
Right.
end up agreeing to disagree. Maybe it's, you know what? I really think this should be a defensive parent.
Mhm.
I just, and as a head coach, I'm saying, I just can't see that, but here's why.
Mhm.
I think it's important, again, from the head coach piece. Like, I think if you're a good head coach, just like if you're a good father or a good parent in general, good mom, you don't have an ego, right? The days of because I said so, they don't really work in today's world very well.
Right.
They're not really well accepted, and probably nor should they be, because any decision you make, you do have a reason for that decision. So why not share that with that individual who you have to either parent for the next so many years, or coach for the next so many years, or work with on your staff for the next so many years, so that you at least have an understanding of the reasoning of why you're saying what you're saying.
Right.
I think that's the most important part, is to be open and transparent with those individuals, because any decision you make, again, coming from confidence rather than ego, yeah, I can back it up. I can tell you why, because in this situation, both those players are very offensive minded, and they're both going to want to be jumping into the play. Somebody has to be able to be the last guy back, and neither one of those are going to be the last guy back. So that's
All right.
my feeling. We could try to practice, and that's the other thing where we have practice. You know, we can try. Let's try some of these pairings of practice. And very often we try them, and you look at them, and you know, as often as not, it's like, yeah, that's not going to work. Or
Mhm.
all right, that might be something to look at, something to at least keep in mind if we need to change things during the course of the game. Because that's the other thing. The game is so fluid. You have to be willing to change things as it's going, right? You can't wait sometimes till the end of a period to change something, because it may be too late.
Right.
So you have to have that open-mindedness to be able to do that. And the best way to get that is to experiment with that kind of stuff at practice too.
Right. You're bringing up another
Very
great
good.
point. Patience is key,
Mhm.
right? Like immediate gratification we talked about before in coaching. You might see something as an assistant coach, and go, oh, you know, I think this would work. Let's try it in the next shift. Like that is not how this works, unless it's like a really desperate situation. You
Right.
poke and you prod, and the season's a living thing, and you try things. And look, things are going to happen. Kids will get injured. Things will happen. Things will happen.
Sure.
You got to be able to navigate those waters, right, as a unit. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Christy, go ahead. I saw
Yeah.
you.
Oh no, this is a great conversation. Appreciate your honesty and your openness. And I think, down the road, the kids, and I can say this with my own kids, they may not necessarily remember what the coach did or what the coach said, but they do remember how the coach made them feel.
100%.
So I think that's really important for coaches to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think I agree with that 100%. I think that has to be your driving force. Now, there's always difficult conversations. Honestly, one of the most difficult conversations I ever had with a player, and this kid was great. Again, it was very early on, and to this day, that kid is probably top 3 in the hardest working player that I ever coached.
Oh, wow.
And at
Yeah.
one point, he came to his senior year. He was not in the lineup a lot. Came in, was super frustrated, more or less had it out with me and my staff, saying, I do this every day. I'm here. I work harder than everybody else. I deserve
Mm,
a chance.
Hmm.
And the most difficult conversation I had was, I understand exactly what you're feeling, and I understand your frustration. But at the end of the day, taking the personal aspect out of this, you still have to be better than someone else to get into the lineup. And he understood it, didn't like it,
mm,
didn't really have an answer for that, because that's the harsh reality of athletics. right? You can't just put people in the lineup because you're nicer than they are. At the
Right.
end of the day, you have to be better in some way,
Right.
Mhm.
some way. And then, he got awards at school academically. He was like our seventh man. Like he got all those accolades. It was really tough for him, and it was really tough for me to have that conversation because he's a great human being. But that was probably one of the hardest conversations I think I ever had to have.
Yeah.
I had one too, Christy and Pete, that I remember a player came up to me and the head coach and said, I'm owed this thing.
Oh dear.
And I had to look him in the eye and say, you are not owed anything.
Anything.
That is
Yeah.
not how this works, right?
Yeah.
And again, he was saying that in a completely inappropriate way. This wasn't
Mhm.
like we lied to him or anything. We didn't. I mean, he just felt like he was owed something because he did something. I said,
Yeah.
no, and I said, I'm not owed anything. I'm not owed a thing. Like I'm not owed a job, right? It was a little bit of the mentality of the time, if you will. There was a little bit of derangement of how this works in his mind. Now, this player actually did not stay on the team, believe it or not, but I tried. I sat down with him. I really tried to explain to him the philosophy here, and it wasn't a fit. and we had to remove him from the team at some point. I'll reiterate, we did everything we could to try and reincorporate this player into that team bond, and just was not a fit. All right. That again, harsh realities of coaching. That's going to happen at some point.
Mhm.
And again, you
Have to
have to
have
be
the ability to
built
have
for
the
that. Again, we go back to like who you are as an individual, your
Right.
confidence you have. If you have an ego, you're going to be given like some really short answers, like, how dare you approach me like that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
X, Y,
Yep.
Z. Whereas if you have confidence, let's talk about this.
And that's how I followed it up. Yeah, like we can
Yeah.
discuss this, but don't tell me you're owed something. And again, these tough conversations will happen. Adversely, Pete, I had a coach one time talk about ego. I remember after a practice, I went up to him and I remember this as coming as completely polite. I'm sorry, completely polite. It's possible I didn't, but I remember genuinely wanting to have a conversation and asking for the time to talk about positioning and something like that. I really wanted to have a good conversation. And he turned around and said, I mean, he was horrible. He was just accused me of making it all about me. And he goes, how dare you question what we're trying to do? And
Yeah.
I genuinely was not trying to do that.
Mhm.
But as I got older, I realized, well, this was all ego. This person doesn't even coach
Sure.
anymore. Right.
Yeah.
Like he took it as I'm challenging him. And I said, no, I want to learn. Right. Now, again, I was young. I'll admit this. It was very possible the way I said it may have came across the wrong way, but
Mhm.
I still think that was an incorrect usage of his power of accusing me at the time of saying that I'm trying to ruin his team when that was not my intention. A good coach would have at least explored that a
Yeah.
little bit with me. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
100%. That's just a complete defense mechanism there.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There's no question of that. I mean, whenever you approach someone from a standpoint of, hey, I really want to know because maybe it makes me better. That was my move, honestly, as a coach with the officials, with the referees. I would always, when I would bring them in, like they're ready, right? They're ready to, okay, here I go. I'm digging my heels in.
yeah.
And I would always say, I didn't see what you saw. Explain to me what you saw so I can make my guys better. I want to
Right.
make
That's
myself
fair.
better. I want to make my guys better. Now you
Yeah.
diffuse the situation. We can actually have a conversation.
Right. Right. And I think that's a great tactic with the officials. You know what I do? This will make you laugh, Pete. I always offer them a stick of gum before the game. And like sometimes I'll get what I have bad breath. Like, yeah,
Chew on this for a while.
I just want to make sure you're comfortable, buddy. So, just to break the ice a little bit. But look, we had Kerry Fraser on years ago, and he had a great statement about the refs, which is this, you can't beat the refs and your opponent. You
Yeah,
just can't. You can't
that's
be playing
true.
against both of them. So
Right.
I think that there's a proper way to discuss things with refs. That's a topic for another show.
Sure,
How
sure.
to deal with refs. But Pete, look, we discussed a lot today. I wanted to kind of at least give you the mic here. Is there anything we didn't discuss that you wanted to discuss when it comes to so you want to coach in the NCAA? Did we miss anything here today?
I don't think we missed anything, but I really want to again go back to the confidence versus ego piece because I feel like self-confidence empowers you to execute your difficult decisions and develop your own self-knowledge. And I think ego prevents you from doing that. And if you can acknowledge your deficiencies, because we all have deficiencies, if
100%.
you can acknowledge those deficiencies, that self-confidence supersedes that. And I think that strengthens us as coaches and as individuals to be it if you're trying to coach, if you're trying to parent. I think that is huge in human development and personal development, let alone NCAA coaching development.
Excellent. Well
It-
said.
It is well said. And I'll say this too, deficiencies are opportunities for all of us. This is not just coaching, right? And I think you'll like this, Pete, from an ego to confidence standpoint. And this is a very famous quote I'm going to merge in here. When you have ego, you will coach with the judgment. And when you have confidence, you will coach with curiosity. And when you are
Very
able to
good.
bring curiosity to everything that you do, you will learn at an expansive rate. So when you have a deficiency of, I don't like how I feel about this situation, if you're curious about this, you're more likely to find a solution. Whereas if you're judgmental, you'll probably end up judging yourself and you'll shy away from that, right? I like coaching in a place of wonder. And I've had this happen recently. I was uncomfortable on a bench with the way things were moving. And I didn't get angry. I got real curious. Well, what about this is making me uncomfortable? And I was able to identify that. And then it's like, okay, well, I don't necessarily like that. And I explored it. And I got myself to a really good place with it and was able to kind of navigate it and move past it and have an understanding of it. I'm not saying that's going to happen every time, but approach coaching with curiosity and wonder. And keep in mind, coaching hockey, it's a pretty amazing place to be, right? I think we always have to have that perspective of there are other jobs you could be doing that are not as fun, right, as coaching hockey. But I love that. Come from a place of curiosity.
100%. And again, you hit on it with, if it's not fun, I really don't want to do it. I don't care what it is.
Yeah. Why
If
would
it's
you?
not fun, I don't want to do it.
Yeah. No, when it's not fun, you got to rethink a lot of things. But listen, this has been
things.
a lot of things, right?
Yes.
Life's not always fun, but you should find fun in your, enjoyment in your work. This has been a great episode. Pete, again,
Excellent.
when he texted me, Christy, and said, "Hey, I've got an idea for an episode," I got
love
a
it.
pencil out and I was like, tell me your idea. And this is what it turned
Yes.
into. So you want to coach in the NCAA? What a great episode title. Pete, I want to thank you for being on here today. Another rock star episode from you, man. We might just have to move you here. Just keep you here full time.
Yeah, I'm retired.
I love it.
That's the perfect answer. You're a part-time guest. That's it. Look at it. No, thank you, sir, for coming on today and sharing your wisdom.
Thank
It's
you.
really great to catch
Appreciate
up with both of you. I'm glad things are going well for you.
It goes both ways, my
Again,
friend.
Caitlin, setting everything up. That's always appreciated.
Yeah, we have the best producer in the business, and you guys don't see
We
her on
do.
the air, but the show doesn't run without her. And then Christy, welcome back again. Thanks. Good to have you.
Thank
here.
you.
Good to see you. All right. That's going to do it for this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Remember, all the episodes available wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you have the opportunity, please give us that 5-star review. That really helps us. And make sure to check out the Facebook group, Our Kids Play Hockey, where we share a lot of extra stuff. You can ask questions. You can interact with the big, gigantic family we've made. But without further ado, we're going to end it there. We'll see you on the next episode. Have a great week, everybody. And remember to always skate on. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.